The BCS selections are out. Mark Rogers TV here to talk about the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. Stanford 11-2, surprise, surprise, Wisconsin at 8-5, champions of the Big Ten. These two teams met the last time Stanford made a Rose Bowl 13 years ago, New Year's Day of 2000. The roles were reversed then, though. Stanford came in the underdog at 7-4 under Tyrone Willingham, who of course later coached at Notre Dame. Wisconsin, with a Heisman Trophy winner, Ron Dayne, defeated Stanford 13 seasons ago. Stanford, though, comes in red hot, legitimately a top 10 team. Look at the teams that they faced in the last month and look at what Kevin Hogan has done. Redshirt freshman quarterback has taken over for the senior, Josh Nunes, who was ineffective, not generating much offense. And Hogan didn't really get to warm up against any cream puffs. Yeah, he got in against Colorado, but then it was straight against Oregon State, Oregon, and UCLA twice. Hogan, 4 for 4, including the Pac-12 championship, completing 73% of his passes, 9 touchdowns and 3 picks. He has been spectacular, physically, mentally tough, making the throws and not many mistakes. And he hands it off to Stepfan Taylor. Stepfan Taylor, 1,400 yards, 4.8 per carry, 12 touchdowns. He's not explosive, dynamic, with great speed, but he is fun to watch because he is tough to bring down, refuses to go down, and he is going to be a tough assignment for Wisconsin's linebackers. Zack Ertz, one of the top tight ends receiving in the country. We expect that from Stanford, and Ertz is the latest addition. 66 receptions and 6 touchdowns, but Stanford most notably presents a lot of challenges for the Badgers on defense. The front 7 right there with Alabama, Notre Dame, South Carolina, Georgia, one of the top units in the country, defensive line, and the linebackers with Shane Scove and with Chase Thomas, who's got 7.5 sacks. Henry Anderson up front with 5.5 sacks, and we really like Terrence Brown, the cornerback. Watched him play against Oregon from gun to gun. He accelerated on the football against those Oregon receivers, broke up a lot of passes. Terrence Brown is a top cover corner, and against UCLA, he got the job done as well as Stanford beat the Bruins 2 consecutive weeks. For Wisconsin, we know that the Badgers have high expectations. They've established themselves as a top program in this country, but got off to a bad start. Barely beat a couple underdogs in Utah State and Northern Iowa, then went out to the West Coast and lost to Oregon State. It looked like a horrible loss at the time against a 3-9 Oregon State team from 2011, but of course the Beavers have proven to be a very, very good football team, top 15 in the country. So Wisconsin lost that game. Couldn't run the ball early in the season. Of course, they had to replace Russell Wilson at quarterback, who's now doing a fine job for the Seahawks. Won a game today against the Bears in overtime. So Danny O'Brien, also coming from Maryland, a la Russell Wilson, took over. And after having a great freshman season, he had a bad sophomore year at Maryland. Wisconsin expected him to bounce back and be more like the freshman he was with the Terps, 22 touchdowns and 9 picks, but he was not. Also, the offensive line, not to the standard of Wisconsin in recent years, and the receivers were not up to the standard that Wisconsin's had in the recent past, so Danny O'Brien faltered. Joel Stave took over, performed much better, but he got hurt. Enter third stringer Kurt Phillips. It's not like this guy can't play, and that's why he's the third stringer. 19th rated high school quarterback coming out of Tennessee 4 years ago, blew out his knee twice. This kid, you gotta root for him. He's now the starting quarterback for Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl, making just 4 starts, and he has responded. Although we totally understand that he's not really been shouldered with the burden of the offense. He's had to throw just 65 passes in 4 games. He only threw it 8 times in the Big Ten Championship against Nebraska, completing 6. Most likely, Kurt Phillips is going to have to throw the ball a lot more in the Rose Bowl because you can expect Stanford's going to load up against the run and force him to beat their secondary and beat the pass rush as well. Kurt Phillips, again, 65 passes in 4 games, but he may need to chuck it 25 or 30 in the Rose Bowl. But of course, he's got the support of an ever-improving ground game. This Wisconsin ground game got halted early in the season. Montae Ball could not get running room, but he still turned out to have a great season. Really rammed it ahead down the stretch, 1,800 yards, 21 touchdowns, had a huge Big Ten championship game with over 200, as did the freshman Melvin Gordon, who came in the second half after Wisconsin blew away Nebraska at halftime 42-10. Gordon's a freshman, and then you've got James White, the third running back, or really the second running back behind Ball. He ran it out of the Wildcats, so that gives Stanford something to think about as well. They're going to have to prepare for James White, the fast runner out of Florida, out of the Wildcat. He ran it for over 100 yards in the Big Ten Championship as well and has 800 rushing on the season. Wisconsin passing, not just limited at quarterback with Phillips' limited experience, but also at the wideout position. Jared Abbrederis caught 46 and 5 touchdowns, but he is basically the deep threat. So Wisconsin on defense is very fundamental, not spectacular. They ranked about 3rd and 4th in most categories in the Big Ten on defense. It's going to be up to Chris Borland and Mike Taylor. That's where the defense begins and ends at linebacker. Taylor, the leading tackler in the Big Ten. Borland, 8th. And Taylor also had 5 sacks, and Borland had 13 sacks in the Big Ten championship game. And Devin Smith also at cornerback for Wisconsin, one of the tops in the Big Ten in the secondary. Top 3 in the Big Ten in interceptions and passes defensed. So he's going to be challenged by the passing game of Kevin Hogan and company. So Wisconsin, 5 losses, but they lost a lot of close games down the stretch. Got their act together in the ground game late in the season. Kurt Phillips is going to have 4 weeks solid to get coached up, to practice, to get ready to throw the football more than he ever has at this level. Wisconsin's in the Rose Bowl for the 3rd consecutive time. They suffered 2 tough losses down the stretch to TCU and to Oregon, an Oregon team that, of course, is very fast and very talented last year. But Jared Abbrederis fumbled a late drive pass down the left sideline, or Wisconsin might have pulled out the win. Of course, they also drove it down to inside the 30-yard line late in the ball game and just ran out of time when Russell Wilson couldn't get that last pass off. So Wisconsin, they barely lost to TCU 2 years ago, 17-15. Barely lost to Oregon last year as well, and those were top 10 Wisconsin teams. Now is a huge underdog. Nobody expects them to win and pull out this game. Let's see what they've got against Stanford. The Cardinal would look to have advantage all over the place at quarterback and certainly in the passing game and on defense, and stopping the Wisconsin passing game that has limited resources on the outside. There's the Rose Bowl matchup, Stanford and Wisconsin. We need to hear from you now. We're going to talk it up. We've got 4 weeks, as well as the rest of the BCS ball games coming up in January. Let's talk up the Rose Bowl on Mark Rogers TV.